All right, we got a couple community-generated questions today, which should be fun. And
Mm-hmm.
I always want to say that they'll be
Always.
relatively quick, but I'm usually wrong. But I think they'll be quick.
Yeah, I think so too. But hey, like I always say, you get two old timers like us just sitting on the front porch. It can be a while. So
Nothing to
buckle up. You
nothing to
never know.
do.
You never know where it's going to go. Yeah, exactly.
So
Exactly.
the first one's
Uh,
kind of cool, and I apologize to whoever posted. I didn't write down your name, but it was on a recent show, so I'm sorry about that. I'd love to give you a shout out. But the general gist of the question was, how can you tell, or how do you draw the
hmm.
line between a new movement pops up in the gym, on social media, you read about it wherever it is, and how do you know it looks cool? And how do you know
Mm-hmm.
if it is just a party trick, or is it actually something meaningful and impactful that now should be incorporated in your training? What's the
Oh,
delineation there?
this is a great topic. One of my favorites, and I think it's a little timely right now. We're coming off of the CrossFit Games, and there's some quote new movements, and so I think people are kind of invested in that conversation a little bit more
Mm-hmm.
than they have been in a while, which is cool.
Ah,
Um,
a fair topic.
yes, and I think that if you're a coach or a trainer out there, it does fall on you to have a pretty well thought through um, kind of philosophy behind why you would or would not choose to include something. So it is good to talk about that, and especially if you haven't thought about it a lot in the past, you're going to want to.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the first order of business is to try to figure out, are we talking about something that I am just doing on the day because it's fun and I want to see if my athletes can kind of tackle this and how they do at it? Or is this something that we are going to now devote time and training sessions and practice into? Because there's a big difference there. Every once in a while, yeah, it's fun to warm up with a game of dodgeball. That
Right.
doesn't mean that now you got to have a dodgeball specific training plan
Right.
for the twice a year that it shows up. And so that's number one is okay, what are we talking about here? Is this something that you're just trying to play around with to see what happens, or is it something that you are dabbling with to include in the program? And it sounds like the question is more centered around the latter. I've got a new movement or some variation. I think it's worth investing some time into. How do I know if it's worth sinking my teeth into? Is that kind of your read on that question too?
Yep, I would say so for sure. And most people, I program a lot of workouts, and I
Mm.
have, as most CrossFitters do, the movements that make a regular appearance have earned their spot on the lineup.
Yeah,
They come
yeah.
off the bench and they get put in the game regularly because of the value that they bring to the table. And sometimes, it's true, you almost feel like you could do a certain number of movements in a large variety of loadings, rep ranges, whatnot, and be darn near good to go. And then
Hmm.
the new guy shows up and wants some inclusion, and like, look at me, I could make it into the lineup. And it's like, well, and just like you're saying, if you're gonna come on board, are you coming on board twice a year? Or are you gonna we're gonna see you, once every 10 days or something like that?
Yeah,
And I don't want to say I have to always stay open minded, because this good stuff does pop up for sure.
sure.
But truth be told, it's really hard to make the starting lineup as far as I'm concerned. Like there's,
Yeah.
because I think of, is a movement truly useful and meaningful, or is it just a party trick? I think of something as simple as, if I didn't do it, would I be missing out on really anything? And I
Hmm.
think of, some foundational things such as, okay, well, let's remove squatting from the program. It's like, well, that's clearly not a party. It's clearly not a party trick, right? Like, right. Like
Yeah.
everyone immediately knows that's a bad idea. The deadlift, the pull up, sprinting, like, whatever it is, you're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. What do you mean we're not going to do that? And then,
Yeah.
if I bring up a movement, you're like, yeah, okay. I kind of like fill in the blank, but I feel like we cover that already by doing this. Well, then it might be one of those things which is nice to add in for a little bit of variance, keeps people fired up, keeps things feeling new, but it's not something as part of the regular lineup. So that, would I be missing anything if I never included it? That's really high on my list, because I I very much enjoy CrossFit as a minimalist program, like the most bang for your
Mm-hmm.
buck out of the
Yep.
most impactful movements. The smallest amount of time that I can spend in the garage working out provides me with the greatest results. And so there are some really well-established, useful tools that do that. And since time is precious, if I'm not going to do one of those really useful ones and swap something else in, there needs to be a
Mm-hmm.
really compelling argument as to why.
Yeah. And I think if you go back to kind of the early teaching of Greg Glassman and the whole kind of CrossFit ideal is it something that can express a lot of power? Is it something that's going to train a range of capabilities, power, speed, flexibility, coordination, accuracy? How many of those are you going to tackle with a single movement? Things like that are going to be your biggest bang for the buck movements. What I would say though, I totally agree with your ideal of training economy, and you only have so much time, and therefore what you include needs to be thought out and what's the word, kind of graduated into the program. But I also think that if you're looking at something that posed a particular challenge, but now that you've trained it enough, it no longer really poses that challenge, I think that's where you're ripe to start pushing the envelope a little bit further forward. And I'll give you a great example. Double unders, right? Double unders are one of those movements that are challenging for people initially. They take some time to get comfortable with, especially if you don't come from a background where you're familiar with a jump rope. Learning that skill as an adult can be really difficult. It'd be really frustrating. But once you get it down, you've got it, you can figure it out, you're pretty comfortable with it, it becomes efficient. And so you think, okay, what was I trying to challenge initially with this skill? Coordination, a little bit of stamina, there's some cardiovascular endurance. But as I get so good at the double under that none of those things are really a factor anymore, it's a great idea to take that and push it one step further. A handstand push-up's another great example. At the point that you can do 30, 40, 50 strict handstand push-ups, which is what we can see out of some of these high-level athletes these days, or you can kip for a set of, 30, 40, 50, same kind of thing. Well, it follows that you should probably make your training more challenging because you've got that movement at that point. You've got it.
Right.
For the same reason that I would think the same logic would follow for something like a weighted pull-up. At the point that I can do 20, 25, whatever, strict pull-ups, it follows pretty naturally. It's like, well, maybe it's time to start adding some weight to make this training effect similar to what it was in the beginning when I was less developed. And so I think those are the ways to look at what to include with a pretty good foundation. All right, how do I take the skill that I've got under my belt and it is no longer really challenging me, and how do I get it back to a point that it felt like I felt when I was first exposed to it? That, I think, is a really good place to start.
I've got a couple things on that, which is that illuminates the fact that most of us are just fine with the regular movement. There's very few people I know that are like, my sets of 25 strict pull-ups are so boring these days that I'm just going to go start doing or my strict handstand push-ups. I lost count. Is it 40 or 41 that I did?
Let me push back on that a little bit, though. People do adopt this naturally all the time with weightlifting. Every single day, people are like, well, I got really good at lifting 135. It's time to start lifting 155, 165,
Correct.
175. And so that mentality is already there. It just seems to be acceptable in some domains and not others.
Yep.
And that's a little bit weird. So I think it's one of those kind of unexamined elements that people, if they look at it, they're like, oh, okay, maybe I haven't been as diligent as I could be with certain things, even though I'm more than willing to adopt that principle when it comes to something that's easily adjustable like a barbell, or even distance running or
I was just going to bring up running. Yes.
Yeah, perfect. I mean, nobody says, well, I got the mile down, I'm just going to run the same pace on the mile forever. No, you're going to do one of two things. You're going to say, okay, cool. How can I make my mile faster? Or how can I extend the distance that I can hold this pace at? You're not just going to be satisfied with keeping it static. And the same thing holds true for some of these other movements that have more to give. So,
and it's an interesting thing because because what you said is true. Like there are those athletes that have 40 strict handstand push-ups, can do 25 strict pull-ups. And if so, throw the darn vest on. Like have a blast. Like, make it more challenging. But I would also say that, for most people, most of the time, the regular prescription is probably ample. However, that does not mean that you can't throw on the vest for the pull-ups every now and then for some great variance to keep training fun. But, if your max pull-ups are 7, not that there's anything wrong with that, don't think that you only need to be working out with the weight vest, right? But if you still got 7 pull-ups and you want to throw the vest on every now and then, throw the darn vest on every now and then. But probably what you need to do is what you've been already doing to extend your pull-ups, et cetera, et cetera. And I actually just had this conversation or this topic come up recently with somebody who had a really fast Helen. And everyone knows I have a love affair with the workout Helen.
Me too.
And they had a
good one.
They had a quick Helen. They're like, hey, and they asked a genuine, honest question. They were like, look, I've got a really fast Helen time. And they weren't bragging. They do. And they said, so next time I'm thinking about doing it in a vest, which is, hey, great. And their Helen, I think it was like 750 or something like that. Like it was a really fast Helen. It was in the 7s. And, it was a maximal effort. They were on the floor afterwards. They laid it out. And, I kind of told them, like, look, there's nothing wrong. You're crushing Helen. If every now and then you want to throw that on, I got no drama with that. I said, but just don't fool yourself that equally terrifying and beneficial would be to see if you can do a sub 730. And all they did was write back like, oh, I was hoping that you weren't going to say that. Because, because they knew that, you can get plenty out of there, but there is certainly, there's a place for that. You got to keep training fun, got to keep it interesting, got to walk to the gym and smile, but usually what you're doing will deliver the goods. But if you do get to the point that you are top tier in something, have a bit of fun, and mix it up a bit.
I also think, go ahead.
You mentioned the double unders a second ago with, to the point that somebody can just do them and they don't kind of deliver what they used to deliver. I have to tell a funny story about somebody who's so physically capable that I find it annoying. And that is Chris Spieler. And, he's good at double unders. And
he's good at everything. He's good at a lot of things.
He's good at everything. And I remember him saying, I was talking to him one day and I just shook my head. I was like, oh, you and I are two very different athletes. But he was kind of saying, like, in a workout, whatever the double unders were, that's where he would catch his breath. Like that was the recovery, that they were so effortless, so easy, so not taxing that he could shut off his lungs, shut off his brain. And the set of 100 double unders was when he would rest so that he could do something else. And it's like, I don't find 100 double unders to be rest. So you and I are at different levels there. And there are some people that are at that level. And he would probably be one of those people that would very much benefit from mixing that up a little bit.
Yeah. And so I think, to get back to the root question, first question you got to ask yourself is this movement going to challenge a lot of these general physical skills that we hold in such high regard? Is it going to be something that generally can produce a lot of power? If the answer is yes to both of those things, then it might be worth looking into. And then the next question is there an obvious through line from a base skill to what you're about to do now? And if the answer is no, it kind of is just coming out of left field and it's a modified dance step that look cool on Instagram, it doesn't really connect back to anything else, or it doesn't really expand a base skill a little bit further, you're probably barking up the wrong tree. You got to think big picture. And, you mentioned it before we were on air. If you take kind of an economics mindset to the question, it's really true. It's like, okay, you're going to include something else in your training. Great. At what cost, and what are you going to jettison in order to put this new thing in that you no longer have time to train? Is that going to be worth it? And then based on what evidence do you have that suggests that this is going to be worth your while? So
for sure.
Those are some really valid questions to come back to. And I'll finish my thought, I promise. But I do think that, if you look at fitness in totality and you want to be a really well-rounded, fit person, there's some general things that come with that. You should have some general endurance, biking, running, swimming, rowing. Those are pretty non-negotiable. You should have some basic capacity lifting in a variety of different ways, barbells, dumbbells, odd objects, and a variety of different lifts with each. You should be relatively comfortable there. You should be comfortable moving your body through a bunch of different basic motions, squatting, pulling, pressing, in upside down, right side up, basic climbing. But the point that you get so far down any one of those things that I just mentioned, that the adaptations that you continue to gain become just specific to outputting in that one element, you're probably losing the plot a little bit. With the caveat that, hey, maybe you're so interested in that now that becomes what you're passionate about doing, fine, no problem there. But don't kid yourself in thinking that it's now a better generalist pursuit. It's probably not.
Yeah, there's categorizing something as an absolute 100% unquestionable necessity. That's a tight category. That's a tight category. Yep. There's other things that are useful and fun, but you could also not do them and be just fine. And the fun thing is great. I mean, I've been doing CrossFit for a very long time. I'm not at Chris Spieler's level for double unders, but I'm okay at them. They're certainly not rest. And I certainly trip plenty of the time. But even though I'm not at his level, every now and then I walk out into the garage, and let's say that it's a 3-round workout and there's 75 double unders per round. If I'm just feeling bored that day, or I feel like I want to mix it up, even as an okay double under person, I've got a heavy, thick steel cable rope. I might grab that and do 75 single unders with that instead of doing 75 double unders, just because it's different and it keeps me interested in training that day, and that's cool and that's fun. So there is a nice line. There's want and there's need, and both can coexist. And it's nice just to know which one is an accurate description of whatever you're talking about. So hopefully that's helpful for somebody. Whew. Okay. The second topic that we hope to discuss on this show here, highly recommended from viewers as well, was garage gym maintenance, just basic maintenance on the equipment that most people have. What are some very simple tips and tricks so that people keep the gear that they pay their hard-earned money for working properly? And so you're sitting in a garage gym right now. Are you a fan of the maintenance?
Story. Yes, sort of. The answer is yes, sort of. I think that, the beauty of having your own space to work out in is that it's not going to take that much of a beating. If you've worked out in an affiliate, or you own an affiliate, you train in an affiliate, it's just no question that those pieces of equipment in that environment are going to take a much harsher beating than the stuff that you're going to use personally in your backyard or stored under your shed or whatever. And so for that reason, I think the maintenance is relatively minimal for most home gyms, especially if we're talking CrossFitters that aren't going to be using pieces of equipment that are, like traditional kind of selectorized, lots of cables and pulleys and moving pieces.
Right.
There's just not that much to maintain. So I take a pretty minimal approach. I think the most important thing is to try to keep your workspace relatively clean on the general day-to-day cycle of things. So, get the old vacuum going once in a while, mop the floor every once in a while.
I was going to say maybe the general topics for most people in their garage gym would be floor, then barbell, bike, rower. Probably fair to say. I mean, you could get as crazy as you wanted to, but I would think those are the good categories. So you starting with floor?
Yeah, I would say just, the day-to-day, keep it relatively dust and, in my case, dog hair free. Because I tell you, that can be a demotivating factor where you come out and you're like, man, I have a big burpee day on the books and I haven't vacuumed in a couple days and there's dog hair everywhere. You know what? I don't really want to get down on the floor. So little things like that go a long way, in my opinion.
We've got in my garage here, and I will admit, we're going to have this discussion. I am the worst person in the world for any maintenance on any piece of fitness gear I have in my garage since the day that I bought it. And I think what's good about that is it's a testament to how well built most of these things are, and how if you
Yeah.
are lazy with your maintenance, everything's going to be just fine. So I'll throw myself under the bus continually during this conversation here. But since we're on floors, what I do generally just in the garage, I'm a huge fan of the leaf blower. I'll just have a leaf blower, and instead of sweeping out the garage, the leaf blower happens. Everything gets blown out into the driveway, blow it off into the grass, done. Now, you could obviously sweep it if you wanted to. A couple steps beyond that is people will then also, because these conversations happen all the time in different threads that I'm on. And, you mop the entire space down, let it dry. And I dove into a couple of the threads in my community as well today, because this topic comes up every now and then. And a lot of people seem to be a very big fan of a neutral pH floor cleaner is what most people like to do. And that's what they put in the mop, break it down with a certain amount of, water that it says on the side, whatever the proper solution is. They mop the floor down with that. I think it's supposed to kill any germs, bacteria, kind of sterilize it to some degree. And then it go ahead and it dries, and you've got yourself a beautiful floor ready to use whenever you want. And the other thing I'll say, I can't see the floor in your garage. I only got horse stall mats this year. So I have been working out without horse stall mats basically since 2005. I have been dropping barbells from overhead with bumper plates onto bare concrete for however many years that is. And I'm here to tell you, I have never damaged the floor.
That's good.
And I have never had a barbell not work flawlessly. And so it seems to be that everyone's terrified that if they don't drop these things onto a 3/4 inch piece of hard rubber, that bad things are going to happen. And I'm sure there are cases in which that has, but that has not been my experience for a very, very long time. But my wife begged and pleaded me to get horse stall mats. So, happy wife, happy life. I went ahead and purchased some of those. And now I clean my horse stall mats every now and then.
I think it's a fun project to make some lifting platforms. My old garage gym, before we moved, I had 2 lifting platforms that I built just out of plywood and some horse stall mats. Very easy to do. But I agree. I don't think you need as much as people think. There's a lot of nice to haves, not necessarily need to haves. But back to maintenance, I will say that, the day-to-day is not a ton around here. Once a year, I do enjoy, and I don't know if this is necessarily because it's needed, but I do enjoy doing it around Christmas time, is I'll take a few days and I'll pull everything out. I'll clean a bunch of stuff, I'll open up the rower and I'll get in there and get the dust out of the flywheel and re-oil the chain and things like that. And then I will also take my bars and I'll take the end caps off and I'll re-grease, take out some of the rings in there and re-grease them. Now you got to be careful what kind of barbells you have. Some of them, that's not going to be a good idea. But and I'll take a brush and I'll clean out all the old dead skin and chalk from the year. From the knurling. Yep. But it's really not much more than a once a year type of thing. One thing I will do is just a little bit of 3-in-1 oil on the barbell every once in a while, just make sure it's still spinning right. But I tell you, I had an old Rogue beater bar that was the style of bar, not just because I call it that, but that was actually what they named it. Yeah, that was the first barbell that I ever bought from them way back. And I had that thing for years and years and years. And even when it was getting a little bit long in the tooth, after taking it and re-oiling it and cleaning it, it would spin like new. And it was really remarkable how much life it breathed back into the bar. And so if you're somebody that is convinced you need new equipment, sometimes just a little TLC can really make that stuff shine again. You're like, oh, wow, this is actually built to last and it's going to be just fine.
Yes, agreed. And so you've talked about rowers and barbells. So I'll touch on those two real quick. I went to the C2, the Concept 2 website this morning just to kind of see what they had going. And they have a maintenance section there as well. So if anybody really wants to dive in, they've got recommended maintenance. Let me click on it right now. Recommended maintenance daily, every 50 hours of use, and then every 250 hours of use. So you can click on, whatever you want to find there. I have chosen the never option. And so since I've had my my Concept 2 rower, I haven't oiled the chain. I aim the leaf blower at it generally every now and then when I blow out the floor, probably blow dust into the thing, into the flywheel. And the only thing I do for my Concept 2 rower is when I go out for a workout one day and I pull it and nothing comes up on the screen, I change the battery. That is literally all I've ever done. That thing is, I'm not paid by Concept 2 to say this. I have no affiliation with them. That thing is built very well.
Yeah.
It is very durable and it treats knuckleheads like me really well. The only thing that I do, and I don't know if this is, fact or fallacy that I've convinced myself of. The only thing I do with my Concept 2 rower is I never leave the handle, pulled in its little carry. I always take it and then push it all the way forward to the flywheel, just because I figure that's the better thing to do. But other than that, I don't do anything for it.
Yeah. Yep. It's a once a year type of deal for me too. And, same, I got an assault bike. It's the same thing. I'll tighten up the bolts once in a while. I think that those types of things, again, if you're not talking about an affiliate use, it doesn't take a lot to keep them in gear. And especially if you're somebody like myself who, let's be honest, I'm not exactly tearing the arms off of that when I'm riding it. There's very few exceptions to that rule. I'm just not that powerful and not that fit that I have to worry about it so much. So there's that.
Yeah, I had an assault bike for a long time, treated me very well, and I would have to fiddle with some screws every now and then to keep it appropriate. Didn't lubricate the chain ever. Wound up selling that to somebody else. I got a Rogue Echo bike in there now, which obviously it's got the belt instead of the chain. So as far as I'm concerned, I'll never have to do anything to that thing. So we'll see how that we'll see how that goes. And with regards to the barbell maintenance, you're right. I'm sure that the sleeves on my barbells probably could, they spin for sure. They probably could spin better if I just did some of the maintenance that you have. And I've got a feeling that that's potentially why I haven't snatched 315. I think if I got a little 3-in-1 oil in those sleeves, I think it'd go up like butter.
Oh yeah, easy. Yeah, I mean that's the trick right there.
Yeah, exactly. So no, that's about it. Things are made very, very well. The general things would be floor. I mentioned some of the cleaners that people tend to enjoy there. Barbell maintenance can be relatively simple, just a few drops of oil if you are, let's say, standing the barbell in a vertical position. Few drops of the appropriate oil right where the barbell shaft meets the sleeve closest to the floor. Spin it, wipe it up if needed, flip it upside down, hit the other one, with a appropriately hard bristled brush, hit the knurling every now and then, make sure nothing's accumulating there. Chalk, if it accumulates there, can hold some moisture depending upon the coating of the bar. That might form a bit of rust. Get that out of there. If necessary, get the rust off it, light coat of oil, wipe it off so your bar is not slippery and oily, but make sure you're taking care of it. And if you do want to do an actual dissection, like Adrian's talking about here, make sure you do have the appropriate barbell. If you're going to pull the end cap off and get a set of needle nose pliers in there and pull some little clasp out and now dissect this thing, cool. You'll probably, if you do it right, have a really great experience after it's all done. Just make sure you don't put the barbell together and you're looking on the floor and there's one miscellaneous rogue part sitting there. You're like, uh-oh.
It's pretty simple.
Yes.
It's pretty basic.
So that's about it. Other than that, I'm sure there's a whole bunch of other things that potentially could use some maintenance, but floors, barbell, bike, rower are absolutely the big culprits, since most CrossFitters, like you're saying, don't have very fancy selectorized equipments with, pulleys and all that kind of stuff. We're the minimalist program.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll end where I started, which is I think keeping your workspace clean is a big one. I'm just looking around my garage right now and I've got some bumper plates and some kettlebells and some sandbags and odd objects over there. And I'll tell you, that's another thing that deters me from using them is if I've been letting it sit for too long and there's a bunch of dust and built up dirt in a particular corner. I'm like, I'm probably not going to use that sandbag today, even if I had planned to use it. And so a little bit of just keeping things tidy goes a long way in your willingness to get down and get dirty as well. So I recommend, just kind of try to keep it tight.
I have a feeling that these two topics are going to be things that people have some opinions on, which is cool. So as I always say at the end of these shows, you've heard what Adrian thinks, you've heard what I think. That's great. But we like hearing what all of you think. So, what's your delineation between circus trick movement, fancy movement that looks good but doesn't have utility versus this is something really meaningful and I'm going to include it regularly in my training? And I would love to read in the comments examples of, we all know the good movements. Give me some examples of what you think are silly movements. I'd love to see those ones. And then tips and tricks to clean your garage gym space. People have some really creative, hacks that they've found to get their equipment in great condition in a relatively short period of time. So please fill the comments with those as well. I think people will find it really useful. We check those. And of course, I'm talking about, if you're listening to this in an audio format, certainly appreciate the support. But I'm talking about going to the btwb YouTube channel, finding the Very Not Random playlist, find this episode, and in the comments, that's where you can post your thoughts. And as always, if you have a topic or an idea for a future show, we obviously read those and pay a lot of attention. So keep them coming. For Adrian Bosman, I'm Pat Sherwood, and I will see you next time.